Someday, the high and the mighty will fall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. It's always the thrill to have my buddy Charlie Pierce on. We've had a long running, at least for a couple of years, series called Checkpoint Charlie, where we check in with political writer, sports nut, Twitter god, Charlie from the state of Massachusetts. We talk about everything, but we got a lot of politics to talk about. I call Mr. Pierce my psychological morphine drip for all things political. Charlie, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well, Paul. Now we can see each other, which is a good thing.
Yeah. I like. I'd love to see those books you've got. Oh, who's
Yeah, I got some of them. I need bookshelves very badly. I got a stack of boxes here that
who's the
I got to unload.
Who's the guitar player above your left shoulder? I can't quite make him out.
Above my left shoulder, over here?
Yeah.
It's Lee Atwater and B.B. King from the Republican National Convention in 1988.
I wrote a letter to the editor of the City Pages after he had a pretty phenomenal lineup for that gig, and I just asked, was there any black people invited to the show? Because most of the performers were. He had great taste in music, lousy taste in politics.
Really rotten taste in being a human being, too,
He
until
did.
the end.
What?
But, you know, his grave in South Carolina is about 30 yards from the grave of the fabulous Moolah, the famous woman wrestler.
Really?
They're neighbors in the cemetery, yeah.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
And he's just got a marker in the ground. The fabulous Moolah's got this temple.
Right.
And her tag team partner is buried with her, and her daughter's buried with her. Oh, yeah, it's quite the thing.
Kind of like he got kind of these same appreciation that Ivana Trump got when she got married at the when she got buried at the golf course.
Yes, with all the documents probably. I'm not going to say that.
You know, you've had all of the listeners out there in the Wall of Power Radio Hour line. You've got to subscribe to Esquire.com. Charlie Pierce writes several times a week. He's also posts on Twitter. I love all of it. Let's talk a little bit about this past week. Now, we've got the GOP. They're planning on banning abortion, banning contraception, banning books, eliminating Social Security, Medicare, defunding the FBI, targeting people who are investigating January 6th, raising drug prices, and now they're doing human trafficking as political stunts. Is that the contract with America that they're proposing?
They're calling it commitment to America now. And I think a lot of them should be committed, but that's a whole different discussion. Now, we were right here at the business end of some of that stuff down there on the Cape.
Yeah, right, exactly.
On the island. Yeah, it was revolting, really. And the great thing was that this was supposed to be a real clever dick move on the part of Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott, and the people on the island just killed it with kindness.
Well, I loved somebody said on Twitter, great move sending a bunch of migrants to a little island that has probably more lawyers than any one place in America. But I do see there that there was the sheriff down, was it San Antonio, that is starting.
Yeah.
Yeah, good on him. And then I see there's a congressman.
Salazar.
Yeah.
Javier Salazar.
And then I see today I read that there was a congressman, a Dem, of course, from Florida that wants to that's suing DeSantis for misuse of state money.
And our senator up here, Ed Markey, is calling for an investigation too.
Markey.
So not only did this backfire politically, it may have backfired legally too.
Well, I can't think it's going to play with a lot of the Cuban refugees in South Florida.
Well, I mean, you are pretty much shuffling away people who are fleeing a authoritarian socialist regime.
Right.
I mean, the people from Venezuela, are political refugees in every real sense of the word. And I gave up trying to figure out what moves the Cuban population in Florida long ago. because
Where the hell did DeSantis come from?
he was a congressman. He was a Tea Party congressman,
Okay.
and a galoot, really. He was a man of, got the same kind of respect in the House that Louis Gohmert did. Basically he was on that end of the spectrum, and then he went back to Florida and ran for governor and got elected. And now, he's, being broached as the anti-Trump Trumpist.
I was down.
God help us.
I was visiting.
He's not an anti-Trump. He's Trump without tears, basically.
Yeah, funny. I went down to Florida a couple of years ago to visit my best friend. I try to get down there when I have the money, and we went. He lives in Newport Richey with his wife, but we went to a couple of restaurants and a couple of bars, and it was scary how many Trump stickers were on SUVs down there.
Oh yeah, Florida's a need I point out, is an interesting place. I remember every year for 4 years, 5 years, I'd have to go down and cover the Red Sox in spring training when I worked for the Boston Herald, and they trained in Winter Haven, which is exactly in the middle of the state.
Mm-hmm.
It's an hour and a half to the ocean in either direction, and it's basically Baja, Alabama. I mean, it's the designer mudflap capital of the world. The one year I went down there, and the nightlife had doubled because the multiplex had gone from 3 to 6 screens.
This is why.
But seriously,
This is why.
and I just hated it. I just hated it there. Oh God, it was everything that would make you a snob, a northern snob about the South, wrapped up in one town.
I remember one moment in particular. We were waiting outside. We were waiting for a table, and this guy had probably a $40,000 or $50,000 brand new SUV. The guy was maybe between 25 and 30 years old. He comes out with his girlfriend. They get in the car that was parked. He's healthy, young, 25 or 30-year-old, and of course had been parking in the handicap zone for the duration of their dinner. And I said that says as much as I need to know here.
Yeah, there aren't many people in the world who I automatically dislike, but people who do that are definitely up there. Especially the ones that leave their cars. It's one thing to pull into a space so you can move the car. Somebody comes along with the handicap sticker that needs it, but it's another thing to park there and go in and eat.
And the second thing that drives me crazy is the people that don't put their shopping carts back in the place and just leave them willy-nilly in the parking lot. But that's a minor quibble.
But that's fun though. I like to play bumper cars with them when I put them back in that little rack. give it a shove from about 10 feet away.
Who didn't love bumper cars? Were you a go-kart kid? There wasn't a track close to where I lived. I had to drive there was a place called Walter, I can't remember his last name now. Walter somebody's Funland that was in Millbury, which was like 3 towns over from where I lived. And they had a pitch and putt range and a tank tag and a go-kart track and, everything, driving range. And so we would go there. That was one of my go-to dates in high school. But that was the only go-kart track that was anywhere near where I lived. Well, it's something they should bring back. I'm all for that. There was a fella, speaking of those kinds of places, a guy named Reggie Callahan.
Walter Wheeler. I remembered. Walter Wheeler's Golfland, it was called.
God bless Walter Wheeler. Well, there's a fella in the Twin Cities. His name was Reggie Callahan. He gave me my very first gig when I moved to town in '78. I was running cassettes around, little promo, and he owned a strip joint downtown called the Skyway Lounge. I went in to meet him. He had this picture of a young guy that looked kind of like him with the Beatles behind. Well, it turns out Reggie had a place getting on Walter Wheeler's Funland called Reggie's Danceland in Excelsior, Minnesota. And he's now
where?
In Excelsior, Minnesota. But he was a rock promoter as well. I hope on his tombstone it said, and may he rest in peace, he gave debuts to 3 pretty consequential acts. He booked the Rolling Stones in 1963. He booked the Beatles at Met Stadium in 1965. I ran into a waitress of his years later said, yeah, Reggie was the only guy that lost money on the Beatles, and and happened to give Paul Metza his first gig in 1978. So God bless Reggie Callahan and his dance land out there in Excelsior. In fact, that's where they say when the Stones were in town, when they talked to Mr. Jimmy, getting the soda pop at the drugstore, that they ran into Mr. Jimmy, and you can't always get what you want during that tour. But I digress. Let's talk a little bit about Herschel Walker. We knew him a little bit because he played for the Vikings.
He was. I find him a tragic figure, and the best theory I've heard so far is that he will get elected, and then he'll resign. He'll get sworn in, and then he'll resign, and Kemp will appoint a guy who has all his marbles to replace him.
Wow.
That to me would be the kindest thing they could do for him. They certainly don't want him representing them in the Senate, I don't imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's a walking commercial for CTE.
Well, and although it's scary how close that race is.
It's much too close, I know. It's absurd to me how close it is, because you're talking about a guy who isn't all there.
Yeah.
I mean, he just isn't. I feel bad for him. And he's a guy that we already know has threatened his wife with a gun, has strangled her, every week there's a new kid.
Right.
Somewhere in Georgia. And yet all these evangelicals will line up behind him and vote for him.
Yeah, it blows one's mind. Well, let's talk Minnesota Vikings. How about all this latest welfare fraud with Brett Favre?
Oh man, well that is a gigantic fraud, by the way. If it wasn't for Brett Favre, if he wasn't Brett Favre, you wouldn't even notice him.
Right.
He's a real sideshow, and it's a $77 million, theft of COVID COVID relief money. And his is a little bit $5 million part of it for this volleyball thing, but it makes him look like a really bad guy.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan to begin with, but I don't know. You're a big sports guy. I just have such a hard time with just Deshaun Watson and how they're treating him with kid gloves. Really, it's just the NFL. I kind of go back to that Seinfeld. Because I grew up, with the Minnesota Vikings. All those guys, Alan Page, Carl Eller, Jim Marshall, Gary Larson, Fran Tarkenton, they all lived in Minnesota. They all paid taxes in Minnesota. And now
Alan Page became a Supreme Court justice.
He's
a marathon runner.
Yeah, one of the brightest men in Minnesota, and his very close to his wife. His wife passed away a couple of years ago. What Alan Page used to do for the Twin Cities Marathon, he would take out his tuba and play as people were running along through his neighborhood. And not just weeks after his wife passed away, he did that again, just because that's the kind of guy he is. I have him on my hit list to get him on the Wall and Power Radio Hour.
Yeah, no, I met his wife at a Super Bowl. They bring all the Hall of Famers back for the Super Bowl every year, and they have a reception and stuff. And I talked. He and his wife had set up African American History Museum.
Yes.
I don't know. He was a collector of civil rights era memorabilia, I guess.
Well, there's a thing I bumped into on an interview. I think it's on YouTube. He also, in his house, has a real collection of just some ghastly stuff that he talks about. A lot of handcuffs and neck chains from the slavery period.
Right. Yeah.
And which is pretty severe stuff. But if anybody can tell that story, it's Justice Page. You know, I used to drink at a bar in downtown Minneapolis called Eli's Pub, and and the other fellow that I loved to see there almost weekly was Jim Marshall. And Jim,
Oh, really?
yeah, Jim
He
was,
picked up a couple of stools.
yeah. Oh, well, it's funny because he's still a brick, built like a brick S house. And I remember when I was a kid, like I have the Fran Tarkington rookie card signed because they used to do their training at in Bemidji, Minnesota, where my grandparents lived, and so before they moved to Mankato. And I remember an interview when they moved to Mankato, one of the sports writers in town, could it even have been Jim Klobuchar, who was Amy's father, who did,
Yeah.
you know, he did all kinds of stuff, but he'd slip into the sports world occasionally. And so Marshall he loved to dog it during training camp. It just didn't do any work. And I'll never forget, one of the reporters asked him, Jim, you're completely dogging it here in training camp. And he goes, hey man, he goes, there's only so much tread on the tire. So
And of course, he's famous not just for being a great player, but for running the wrong way,
yes, wrong way,
which he will
Marshall.
never live down.
Yes, although I do believe he might have the record for most consecutive NFL games.
That was what was notable about it.
Yeah.
He never missed a snap. I don't know whether he still has that now, but because he would have said it a long time ago.
I always used to ask him, Charlie, I always go, Jim, how's the tread? So let's talk. I have to.
Those were good. Those were good days when they'd hang around the city. The athletes would hang around the city. I remember, being one of my really good friends. Well, not one of my really good friends, but one of the friends I made along the way, sports writing, was Bill Lee.
Really?
And when I worked at the Boston Phoenix, we used to go across the street to a place called the Elliott Lounge every day after work. It was an old residential hotel bar. And Lee used to come in there he came in there a couple of times right from the bullpen, wearing his uniform and his shower shoes.
Wow.
And then after the 1978 playoff game, which they lost to the Yankees on Bucky freaking Dent, they interviewed Bill and they said, "What'd you think of Don Gullett, who was the Yankee pitcher that day?" And Bill said, "Well, Don Gullett's going to the Hall of Fame, and I'm going to the Elliott Lounge." And I have a T-shirt somewhere around here. I have a T-shirt from the night the Elliott closed, and it has that quote on the back.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's just beautiful.
I also have right here handy my official Israel Baseball League bat given to me by Bill Lee.
Well, that's pretty
Did
cool.
some work with the Israel Baseball League.
That is damn cool. Charlie, there's so much stuff going on. What do you think Beto O'Rourke's chances against Greg Abbott are in Texas?
They're not looking good right now.
Yeah.
Every poll I've seen it shows them slipping. Same with Stacey Abrams, by the way, in Georgia.
Yeah.
I still think that's recoverable. Abbott's staking a lot of his campaign down there on immigration.
Yeah.
And so far it's working.
What about Val Demings and Rubio?
I think that I get a real stench of flop sweat from the Rubio campaign right now. I don't think he wants it anymore. I think he realizes he's gone too far off the diving board with Trump, and he'll never get his mojo back. He was the savior of the party back in 2012.
Right.
I mean, I remember writing a column when he gave the he gave the Republican keynote at the convention, and Joaquin Castro gave the keynote at the Democrat convention. I remember writing a blog thing saying if the future of American politics is Marco Rubio and Joaquin
Castro.
Castro, arguing about tax policy. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I was very impressed with both guys. And then Rubio was just, commenced to make himself see the incredible shrinking man at this point. He just gets smaller and smaller and less significant and less important almost by the day. And I don't know that he's got the I don't know if he's got the I don't know if he's got the guns to run anymore.
Right.
And she's a very formidable campaigner.
Well, and she ex-cop, right?
Ex sheriff.
Yeah, ex-sheriff, and rides a Harley.
Yeah, she does.
It's my kind of gal, my kind of politician. What? So, I mean, really, it's been a great week for the rule of law here in the country.
Yeah, it's been a great week for judges.
Yeah.
Judges have really brought the A game this week.
Let's start with Judge Connor and go from there.
Judge Connor.
Yeah, the one that gave the one that said the FBI and Department of Justice can't.
The appeals judge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was that's if you read these orders and rulings that are that are going against excuse me our former president. These aren't. I mean, I've read a lot of documents from courthouses in my time. These are like bricks through the window.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not polite at all. I mean, they're not. They're not dotted with curse words, but
right.
I mean, they are very, very forceful statements of what I think are very principled devotion to the rule of law.
Yeah.
And I mean, they reckon without this Judge Deary down at, the special master, he's the guy that Trump people wanted. And they plainly didn't vet him at all.
Right.
I mean, because he's a real judge, number one, unlike Judge Cannon there, who gave gave Trump everything he wanted. He's a real judge. He used to be on the FISA court. I mean, he's a serious man of the law. Well, and what he did yesterday, in ruling, against the former president, he left. I mean, he didn't leave any bodies on the battlefield.
Yeah.
I mean, he just incinerated the other side.
What a beautiful.
And I think judges don't like people coming into their courtrooms and making them look like a fool.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the feeling that several judges have decided that, wherever he's finding these lawyers, and I think he's probably hiring off, billboards off I-5 in Florida. He's hiring the were you in an accident, people?
Exact personal injury guys.
Midnight, public access personal injury firms.
Saul Goodman.
Yeah, exactly. Or I can't remember the name of the guy in Massachusetts. It's the the legal equivalent of the guys who sell tickets to the drag races. Monday.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well,
you go.
I saw there was a great show at the West Theater. It's a beautiful reconstituted 1940s movie theater here in Duluth, only about a mile from where I live now. And Liz Winstead was doing her one-person show. Are you familiar with Liz at all?
Oh yeah, she's the hardest working woman in showbiz.
Yeah, she's amazing.
I mean, she gigs all the time.
Yeah, and it's really amazing. I mean, she got Trevor Noah his start, Stephen Colbert his start. She was the founder of the Daily Show, and she heads one of the top. I think it's a top abortion rights group based in New York City.
Right.
And
yeah, that's her full time. That's her full time gig besides comedy.
Yeah, and to show you what kind of cojones Liz has, she went on Wednesday. Her show was Wednesday or Thursday night. The next day, she went to, I think it's called We Help, one of the clinics, abortion providers in Duluth, to train the volunteers how you deal with all the BS that you have to deal with when clients are coming into the clinic. I mean, she
Right.
she
Yeah.
walks the walk, she talks the talk, but
Yeah.
she had a great line. She skewered everybody, but she had a great line, and I'm going to let you take it over from here. She referred to Lauren Boebert as the dollar store Sarah Palin.
Oh, I like that. Because because Sarah Palin's not off the shelf at Tiffany's herself.
No, what that was. That,
I mean, I guess she'd be the. God, I don't even know. I can't come up with one. The what's one rung above the dollar store?
whatever that one is, that's what she'd be.
Salvation Army? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, she would. You know what was interesting about that race? There was a guy named Nick Begich up there, who's a Republican.
Yeah, he's a legacy guy too, right?
Yeah, he's a
Big political family.
yeah, from Evelyn, Minnesota.
Really?
Yeah, Joe Begich was a state rep for years. Was involved in all kinds of politics. He just passed away in the mid '80s a few years ago. Great guy. And yeah, so I don't know exactly what his relationship, but good Evelyn guy. And like we were talking about to Judge Jury, imagine this, a principled conservative.
Yeah, I mean there were a lot of them going around. We had them here. We had old waspy Republicans in Massachusetts. Charlie Baker's one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's lost interest in his job about 2 years ago, but he stepped up on this, and he's just a decent skin.
How do you think the DNC? I mean, really, they've got post Roe v. Wade. They've got so much wind at their backs. How do you think they're handling it? I always get worried about the Democrats not putting their best foot forward. What's your take?
Well, I have a lot of respect for Jamie Harrison, who I've gotten to know.
Okay.
And I think he's doing the best he can. I think that the Dobbs decision caught everybody off guard.
Yeah.
I don't know why the Republicans weren't ready for it, because they've been pushing for it for 50 years.
Right.
But the Democrats also seem, all of a sudden, here's this thing that just fell right in their laps, and it took them a couple of weeks to get their footing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them attached themselves to the Clinton thing about safe, legal, and rare.
Yeah.
Which I always thought was kind of a surrender.
Yeah.
Women have a right to privacy based on the 14th Amendment, and that also includes a right to do what they will with their bodies. And don't give me safe, legal, and rare. It's like saying, my First Amendment right, I should be able to use profanity safely, legally, and rarely, or, I should be able to march for one cause or another, but I have to do it like every now and then,
Right.
instead of all the time.
Well,
There shouldn't be a restriction on when you can exercise your constitutional rights. But a lot of Democrats marry themselves to that.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, here's the gift from God.
Right.
It's completely energized voter registration among women in the suburbs.
And, well, you know what? The one thing, I mean, I think you and I would both agree, as most progressive like ourselves, that the GOP has been the party of, hypocrites. You've been following since, you nailed them. You started this, stuff I've read from you, from the Reagan era, correct? Or
Yeah, I mean, the first presidential campaign I covered, which was the Boston Phoenix, was the Republican side in 1980, which was the Reagan election. So I got a good look at I got to look at the foundation stones of what we're seeing now.
The building blocks.
And you can draw a straight line. It's not hard to draw a straight line from the Reagan campaign in 1980 through the Bush campaign against Dukakis, through Newt Gingrich, through the impeachment of Bill Clinton, through what the Bush people did in the aftermath of 9/11, to what was done to Obama, to where we are now.
Yeah.
It's It's not Route 66, but it's close.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, you know what?
you don't need it. You don't need a a AAA triptych roadmap
Right.
to get from one spot to the other, as I think Rick Perlstein proves in his book. I read long ago when I was covering the Reagan campaign. I read a book by Sid Blumenthal.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wrote a book a long time ago.
He was
I have
a
it
New York
somewhere.
Times guy, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, for a while, but he was a Clinton aide,
Okay.
and he worked at the other alternative paper in Boston. There were two. I worked at the Phoenix, and Sid, I think, was there before me, but he was at the Real Paper,
Okay.
which was the one that was based in Cambridge. Anyway, he wrote a book called The Rise of the Counter-Establishment in 1979, which showed how the Republicans, how the conservatives had gotten so far ahead in things like direct mail
Right.
and stuff like that. And he also traced how their success in those fields made them more conservative
Right.
and made hardcore conservatism more palatable.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can find it anywhere, I mean, I'm sure you can, find it on, Amazon for $3 or something now. But it's very prescient on what we've been through.
Well, this.
And I think it's Sid's best book. But
I couldn't even believe.
he's in the middle of writing a multi-volume book on Lincoln, a multi-volume biography of Lincoln now, although why we need another biography of Lincoln is beyond me, but okay.
Well, whatever floats his boat. But what blows my mind, I couldn't even believe it was brought up. And no less an authority than Judge Clarence Thomas mentioned it, and now it's in the echo chamber of the GOP. They want to outlaw abortion, but they also want to outlaw contraception.
Yeah, because the target has always been the right to privacy.
Right.
Conservative Republicans don't believe in it. They will tell you it's not in the Constitution. It was made up in the Griswold case, which was about contraception. That it doesn't exist they don't believe in unenumerated powers. They don't believe in what they call substantive due process. And I think they're going after it by degrees. They've got their big win on abortion. Now they're going to go. I don't know that if they, succeed in doing to contraception what they've done to abortion, I don't know how the Republicans ever get another woman in America to vote for them ever again. But, I think that's where they're headed. It's certainly where Thomas is headed.
Yeah.
And right now he's driving the train. John Roberts has no control over that court. In fact, I just wrote about this, I think, a week ago, in the newsletter that I do. None of the institutional leaders in the Republican Party have any control over the institutions they lead.
Mm-hmm.
Mitch McConnell does not control the Senate.
Right.
Kevin McCarthy does. He might as well be an elevator operator in the House. He's just sitting there begging the crazy people to make him speaker again. And John Roberts doesn't control the court. I mean, the Alito, Thomas, Kavanaugh, Barrett block controls the Supreme Court now. They're not listening to Roberts. Roberts tried to somehow put together a more moderate decision on abortion, and they just ran right over it.
Speaking of elevator operators, I was out in D.C. at a Future Music Coalition conference, and I was just kind of taking a tour of, I don't know if it was the House of Representatives. Anyway, there was a barber shop down there. Everybody got all the Pauls got their hair clipped there. But I took a elevator down, and I found myself, just he and I, in the same elevator with Ralph Reed. And I thought, boy, here's my
talk about the undead. Talk about the undead. Where did he come from?
Here's my chance, But those are the guys that are running around when
Jack Abramoff fell.
Yeah, exactly. Well, didn't have Jack had a little come to Jesus moment, and he's probably back at it, huh?
Well, no, I mean, he did the, I'm McCarthy who works for the police now,
right?
Kind of thing, I mean, here's all the bad stuff I did, and I can teach you how not to let bad people like me do it again. I mean, I find that incredibly insincere, considering he's probably got millions of dollars,
Right.
that he, scammed from people, salted away somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure.
Uh,
What?
so anyway, getting back to like the week in law, boy, oh boy, oh boy, I do not want to be someone who gets in New York Attorney General Letitia James.
Wow, rock star.
I mean, I do not want to get in that woman is not playing.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
And
I think, and honest to God, I believe it. I think if you gave him a choice between running for president again and winning, but giving in to Letitia James and never being part of the New York City real estate scene again,
yeah,
I think you wouldn't make that choice.
yeah,
I think the real estate stuff, I think that's his whole identity.
right.
And it's been his whole identity for a lot longer than he's been a politician.
Right. You know that I'm sure you watched Malta Gape, the interview that Trump did with Sean Hannity. And for me, the tell was when he was talking about sending the classified documents. And he said, if you watch it closely, he said, if I send it to Mar-a-Lago or what, and then he was going to say to wherever, but he stumbled over it, knowing that the tell was that he actually had sent these to other places as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I didn't notice that at the time, but people have pointed it out. Was he going to say Bedminster? Was he going to say, Turnberry? Maybe they're in Scotland. Who knows?
Right.
Maybe they're buried with Ivana. Who knows?
But we do know Hillary's emails were probably not there. And
no, they were not there, and the FBI didn't plant anything.
Let's go across the pond here. What's going on in Iran? Is that? I mean, did
you got some? What's going on in Iran? You got some very brave women.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me, and I don't know. My feeling is that it won't end well.
Yeah.
But I'm nowhere near. What do you call it? Foreign affairs expert to know.
Yeah.
Much about Iran. But this killing of this woman in custody. This is starting to look like the Steve Biko of Iran.
Yeah.
This woman is now a rallying point. And I would also say, I think old Vlad Putin has overreached too.
Yeah.
There are Russian men fleeing to the borders.
Yeah.
Rather than being drafted.
Yeah. Well, they're going into colleges.
And they're having huge demonstrations now.
Yeah.
The Ukraine adventure has turned out to be a disaster. I don't know how long he can hang on.
Well, I just see another one of his top specialists in aviation fell down some stairs and died.
Was unable to fly.
You had a great line.
Reminds me of Jim Carroll's lyric. Tony, can you fly? But Tony couldn't fly. Tony died.
So you had a great line, a little dark, as occasionally the Charles Pierceisms are talking about. Couldn't they just do it with the poison-tipped umbrella?
Yeah, that was imaginative. That was like, Man from U.N.C.L.E. stuff. I was very impressed by that.
Well, and let's not
throwing guys out windows. That's just crude.
Let's not forget Robert Vaughn came of age in Minneapolis.
Did he?
Yeah, sure did. I went to Washburn High School.
Man, you rep the land of 10,000 lakes. I got to tell you, that's really good.
Well, yeah, and his Vaughn Peter wasn't his brother Peter Vaughn from Mission Impossible? I believe.
Peter Vaughn?
Yeah, Mission Impossible, the blonde-haired guy.
No, it's Peter Graves.
Peter Graves, yeah.
He was James Arness's brother.
Right. Okay.
The Gunsmoke guy.
Then I take it all back. But speaking of Gunsmoke, I'm taking a wild left turn here. I went up and I did I guess I'm talking about celebrities, people that went on from small towns and made a name for themselves. I did a great interview yesterday with my English teacher, a guy named Tom Moore. Tom was a student of the great B.J. Rolfson, who was Bob Dylan's 11th grade and 12th grade English and Humanities teacher. And there's a fellow named Keith Miles that's writing a book he wrote a book called Dylan in the UK, Troubadour Tales. Dylan in the Big Apple now. He's finishing a book called Dylan in Minnesota. And he got a hold of me.
Did Bob graduate from high school?
Yeah, Hibbing High School, class 59. But
Okay.
BJ was a legendary teacher. And and my English teacher, it turns out, studied under B.J. Rolfson. When Bob's dad died, Bob came back from New York to the funeral in Hibbing, and they were around the Zimmerman household, 2425 7th Avenue. And Bob went up to BJ and said, "You are my greatest influence." And so I'm going to write a chapter on this book talking about you. Here's the straight line from B.J. Rolfson to 2016 Nobel Prize for Literature. But I was talking to my English teacher, so I feel like I got a little bit of BJ's magic through my English teacher, who also hired me to play bass for Tony Perpich and the Perpetones, a polka trio, when I was in ninth grade. And Tony Perpich was the first cousin of legendary Minnesota Governor Rudy Perpich. So Tom was an athlete, quarterback, basketball player. Then he coached at the Roosevelt High School in Virginia, my hometown, in 1973 and 74. And so got to watch Kevin McHale play. And that's why this long story to get around to Boston Celtics fan and my guest, Charlie Pearson. I said, "Tom, did you ever think that McHale was going to be as good as, could you see it back then?" And he said, "No, he was really tall and gangly." He said, when the Blue Devils played the Hibbing Blue Jackets, he said it was like the Lilliputians versing the Land of the Giants. He goes, the shortest guy on the Hibbing team was 6'4". I think McHale was 6'7", 6'8", and the tallest guy was 6'11". But he posits that McHale really got his chops together when he played with Michael Thompson with
Yes.
the Gophers at the U.
Yeah, which was a real bomb squad of a team. I don't know why they didn't go further than they did. I mean, there was a lot of talent on that.
Yeah, but and I guess Kevin still has a lake cabin a little north of Chisholm Hibbing, golfs every day. He's also on my hit list for the Wall of Power radio.
Oh yeah, you got to get him. You got to get him on. You got to get him. I'll tell you my favorite Kevin McHale story. Kevin McHale has like one of the quickest minds of any athlete that I've ever met.
Okay.
And he had to, because he was playing with Bird, who was an all-time trash ball.
Right.
But McHale was. We were in Houston in the '86 finals. And it was Celtics practice. And in the paper that morning, Nils Lofgren was traveling with the Celtics. He and McHale had somehow become friends.
Right.
And so we were in Houston, and Roomful of Blues was down there.
Okay.
And Lofgren sat in with them, and McHale and his wife went to this club to see them as anybody would. And McHale, I think they stayed for one set, and they went home. But the gossip columnist at the Houston paper, a guy named Paul Harrison, wore a big white Panama hat, so you could absolutely not miss him. Anyway, he obviously got this secondhand, and he wrote that McHale had been, quote unquote, partying the night away at, whatever the club this was,
Right.
the night before a playoff game. And so Harrison's covering the whole event, so he comes to practice the day after the game, the day after the column run, and McHale just goes up one side of the guy and down the other. Why didn't you check? Blah, 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 blah. And at that moment, Bill Walton comes up and decides to be the peacemaker.
Sure.
And he goes up to McHale and he says, "Kevin, leave the guy alone. He's just doing his job. He made a mistake." Leave him alone. And McHale doesn't miss a beat. He turns around to Walt and he says, "Yeah, well, that's how all that stuff started about Patty Hearst hiding in your attic."
Oh, that is a phenomenal story and a great.
And Walton just kind of turtled away. I mean, it was one of the great mic drops of all time.
Patty Hearst living in your attic, Bill Walton. That's phenomenal. And
Who's also a great guy, by the way. He's one of my favorite.
I got to meet him one of these days. But this has been a great conversation. We call these shows Checkpoint Charlie with the great Charlie Pierce. And thank you so much for your time, everybody.
Hey, I see Bob's in Finland or someplace now. Huh?
Oh yeah, he's got a nice tour set up in throughout Europe, and really interested to see if he's going to. You know, I saw him 2 nights in June in Los Angeles, which were phenomenal, and it would be interesting to see if he was doing a lot of Rough and Rowdy Ways. What I loved, he did one of the, I don't think it was Moonlight in Vermont, but he did a Frank Sinatra tune, which was cool because the Pantages Theater was right around the corner from Capitol Records. So it was, where Frank used to record. So I thought, I love that kind of geographic happenstance.
Capitol Records is that round building, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one that gets blown up in all the disaster movies.
Exactly.
Like the Empire State Building in New York, in the disaster movie in New York. Capitol Records always gets blown away.
You know what? They actually several years ago wanted to tear it down, but it's such an iconic historic place.
It's what means L.A. to so many people.
For sure. Well,
all right, my friend.
Charlie, thank you so much for your time. We'll stay in touch. Everybody out there in the Wall of Power Radio Orlando, subscribe to Esquire.com, and you get a little taste of this this genius several times a week. Charlie, great chatting with you, and good seeing you in person via Zoom.
Hey, this is great. I gotta get up to the manse there at some point and do this live.
Anytime. You're always welcome. And I get my guest room together. I should have a new mattress and box spring for the bed in a couple weeks. Anytime.
All right, my friend.
Thanks, Charlie. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
You bet.
Thanks for listening to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. The show is produced by Paul Metza, engineered by John Supersonic Saristo. Great news, my book, Alphabet Jazz, Poetry, Prose, Stories, and Songs is out. You can get it on Amazon in Kindle or paperback. We'd like to thank our guest, Charlie Pierce, and like my dad used to tell me, remember to be kind and make someone happy.
Power brokers, the wall of power will fall. Someday, the high and the mighty will fall. There will be no power brokers, the wall of power will